Morning and welcome to the third day of PLF. There is a small announcement I'd have to make before this program starts. There's a small change in the schedule today. Mr. Natwar Singh is unable to attend the festival due to ill health. Instead, we are going to treat you to a sparkling chat between two super journalists, Shekhar Gupta and Arun Shourie, from 12 o'clock to 12:30, followed by the Cultural Elephant by Naresh Narasimhan from 12:30 to 1 o'clock. I start this session now. The session is called The Outsider Inside, India Through Foreign Eyes, and the panelists are Dudney, Dominique Varma, Andie Arment. And this session is moderated by Sunil Sethi. Dudney has written Delhi, Pages from Forgotten History. He is a junior research fellow at Oxford University. Dominique Varma, who studied classics and literature at the Sorbonne and has an MA in Indian philosophy and Sanskrit, teaches at the University of Lille in the north of France. She co-edited a collection of essays entitled Memories of the Second Sex. She has written novels Shifting Sands and After the Deluge. Andie Arment has joined the US Consulate General in Chennai as Cultural Affairs Officer, and he comes to India from the US Interest Section in Havana, Cuba, where she worked as the American Citizen Services Chief. She has previously served as Information Officer in Karachi, Pakistan, and Public Affairs Officer in Surabaya, Indonesia. Journalist, columnist, and TV presenter Sunil Sethi has hosted the weekly literary show Just Books on NDTV since early 2005. He was one of the founding editorial team of India Today, has worked for the Hindustan Times and been a columnist for the Times of India and the Indian Express. His journalism has appeared in The Economist, the Boston Globe, and several international publications. He has scripted and presented documentaries for the BBC and Channel 4. So without further ado, we begin this session. Mr. Sethi, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a fascinating topic of discussion, the outsider inside. Three remarkable panelists who've immersed themselves in India and Pakistan and led very varied and interesting lives. To my left, Dominique Varma, a French scholar and student of Indian philosophy and history, who has been writing, teaching, and researching India for so long that she ended up marrying an Indian and very proudly informed me that she now holds a person of Indian origin card, though not because of her literary or spiritual inclinations, but by virtue of finding an Indian spouse. Andie Arment is, on my right, is a fascinating case study of a bureaucrat turned subcontinental. A lawyer by training, she's a member of the US Foreign Office. She's a career diplomat. And on her first posting to Karachi? Second posting to Karachi, she became enamored of the country in more ways than one. She ended up marrying a Pakistani. She's now the cultural counselor, the US cultural counselor in Chennai, which presents an interesting conundrum. How does an American, and Americans are not too popular in this country at the moment, this moment, well, we're trying to heal our relationship with Narendra Modi behaving like a rock star at Madison Square Garden. But it's interesting for you as a US citizen married to a Pakistani to be serving in India. It must present problems. Dudney is a scholar of Persian at Oxford. His early degrees are from Princeton, and he arrived here several years ago and has been coming back and living here as a research scholar. My first question to all three of you, what were first impressions of India and Pakistan? I mean, in her case, Pakistan, but yours in India. Your very first when you landed here.
Maybe my very first impression as a tourist, which was in Delhi in maybe '82, was rather chaotic. But I liked this kind of chaos. But after that, my real first impression of the country was when I got this scholarship to study cinema in Pune, after, in fact, meeting with Satyajit Ray, among others, in Calcutta. And there, I had a sense of organization, of, in a way, freedom. And for me, though I come from a free country, one word which I would associate with India is freedom. And of course, with many flaws, many injustices, but I would feel certainly foreign in a country where the citizens have no freedom to express themselves, there is no freedom of expression, no freedom of movement, where artists, poets can be sent to jail or to Laogai for writing poems. There I would certainly feel foreign. And I would like to remain a foreigner. So basically, this sense of strange freedom, special freedom, which I'm sure many Indians feel it's not enough and there is a lot to be done for many minorities, it's invaluable.
Let me sum it up. Your first impressions of India about...
That's given to the security situation and our requirements, which are in Karachi, that I traveled everywhere in an armored vehicle. I had an armed bodyguard, a local Sindh police officer who was with me at all times. So in that sense, there was very little freedom of movement in Karachi. However, I filmed a television show called Hamari Andie, so Our Andie, where I traveled to every province, Quetta numerous times, KPK, all over Sindh. And what's funny is, in the end, I often joke with my husband that I'm more Pakistani than him, as I've seen way more of his country than he has ever seen. And when I was traveling, I didn't have those same restrictions. Now, if you will, I'd like to tell about my first experience coming to India, which is on holiday from Karachi. So I traveled a PIA flight, Karachi to Delhi, and the first interaction I ever have with an Indian in India is with the passport immigration officer, and I hand him my passport, and he's confused. What flight is she coming off of? The only flight that just came in is coming from Karachi. So I see the confusion on his face. He opens up my passport. The Indian visa is on one page. On the other side, the Pakistani one. And he looks at me, "Ma'am, you're coming from Pakistan." "Yes, don't worry. It's so much safer here. You'll like India so much better." So that was my first interaction getting off the plane. So
Arthur, we have a sense of chaos and freedom. What she really means is that she felt liberated in India. There was certainly an Indian immigration officer trying to liberate a US diplomat. What did you feel when you arrived here as a student or scholar all those years ago?
Right. Well, I first arrived in India 11 years ago. And my impression was not of something so grand as freedom, but of color. I felt as though I stepped off the plane and entered into to an old-fashioned movie with sort of oversaturated colors. And I've thought about that for years and years and years, because
it's very beautifully put, actually.
But what a strange first experience. What I realized was that eventually what captivated me so much about this country was history and culture, and the way in which history, there's a different relationship with history than we tend to have in the West. There's a sort of there's, if I can put it this way, a sort of deeper cultural memory. So in a way, I feel as though I don't live in 21st century India at all. I feel like I really live in the 18th century or the 17th century, because that's what I study. Yeah, I felt this sense of freedom as well, a freedom to sort of to explore.
Right. So here are three different foreigners who have completely distinct experiences of India, but also different pursuits, their trajectories. I think what you find is what you're looking for. What were you looking for in India that made you stay on, Dominique?
I was not looking for, a husband. But
Me either.
But, when I told some people that I'd fallen in love with India at the first time, and I had not met my husband, they thought, oh, you've met someone. And I said, no. But, because I had studied philosophy and classics, I suppose, before, it was through cinema, yes. And it was through cinema that I met many friends in Pune, in Bombay at the time, and my husband also. But I did meet in Pune many scholars, eminent scholars. And somehow, I had studied classics, and which was not very fashionable in Europe. If you would say, oh, I studied classics, I teach Greek, there was a kind of condescension, so to say. And but I met extraordinary scholars in Pune. And while I was researching for cinema, and especially Bengali cinema, and after that, when I went back to France, I started pursuing studies, Indian philosophy and Sanskrit. And I was more fascinated, but that's a long story, I suppose. Yeah. Right. And I am, a jack of many trades, so I don't want to be specialized in something, but probably the concept, two concepts, of course, I don't want to be long on that, but which are very important in India is truth, satyam, and ahimsa. And those two concepts, seems to, the most impossible things to attain in this world, both truth and non-violence or fighting violence. So these two impossible tasks are crucial, and they are extremely crucial. So somehow, as I said, from metaphysics and philosophy, I went more into political awareness in India. I became more political.
Because also, although both these concepts are essentially spiritual, they were used by Gandhi as political weapons.
Yes.
In our nationalist struggle. Let me take this forward with Andie. My first round was first impressions. Then, you gradually begin a kind of love affair, something that brings you back to a country. And speaking of love affairs, yours must have been especially difficult in Pakistan, in Karachi as a diplomat. Falling in love with the Pakistani. How on earth, if you were surrounded with armored bodyguards, did you conduct a date?
That is a great question. First of all, I met my husband through work. So I was the information officer, the spokesperson for the consulate in Karachi. And we were doing a very first international social media summit. So we were bringing bloggers from Turkey, from Egypt, from Indonesia, to Pakistan and bringing 200 Pakistanis together from all parts of the country, and we were holding it in Karachi. And we wanted local partners, local buy-in. Never did I imagine that one of the local partners would be my husband, who came to a dinner. And I was a horrible diplomat that night. I only spoke to him. I pretty much ignored the other people at the table. And his thought was that, oh, I would like to talk to this woman more. But then my bodyguard is literally sitting where Arthur's sitting, and he's thinking to himself, do I buy the bodyguard dinner? Do I kiss him on the cheek goodnight? What do I do? How do I get around this? Luckily, maybe fate, I don't know, intervened, and some regulations changed at our giant complex in Karachi, and
Which is like a fortress.
which we called Club Fed because it's very beautiful but feels like a prison. We were allowed to bring in personal guests. One American could host 3 Pakistanis. He was the very first. We often joke that I would like to get a hold of that logbook that he had to sign in to come in.
And you were hitting on him.
I knew he really, well, we had talked, and we kept in touch over social media. My husband is very big on Twitter. He has thousands and thousands of followers and Twitter groupies, and I was sure he was used to the attention. But when I invited him over, I knew he must really like me because the layers of security he had to come through and the amount of times he was wanded and had to, be patted down and all these things. I said, this guy would not just go through this if he didn't actually really like me. So we found a way, and we ended up then, after I left Pakistan, we met in Istanbul, Turkey, and he proposed there in Istanbul, and we have been together ever since. But yes, it was a very complicated, and you can imagine people's reactions. I was in Madurai just a few weeks ago, and I was talking to about 500 Indian students. And we were talking about multiculturalism in the US. And we were talking about different religions and different ethnicities, and even in the same household. And I said, well, yes, I have personal experience. My husband is Pakistani. That was literally an audible gasp that came from the audience. And I said, I know, it's scandalous, isn't it? And then I said, and he's a Muslim. I mean, the audible gasp that I got, not once, but twice, I was very impressed with it. I mean, people are very surprised. And honestly, if someone had told me I was going to go to Pakistan and find a husband, meet my husband, I would have said, are you taking some kind of hallucinogenic drug? I really don't think that that's going to happen. But nonetheless, fate intervened, and that is what happened.
Well, love conquers all. And it overcomes all the obstacles of security, bureaucracy, officialdom. Arthur, you, of course, are a scholar of Persian. You came here as a student, and you described your arrival, also a sense of liberation you felt in India. You said you felt a great sense of freedom, but also an escape into the past. You said you could almost very quickly switch into medieval India. Was that because of India, or what was going on in your head?
Well, perhaps I shouldn't psychoanalyze myself in front of dozens of people. It's something to do with India, something to do with what was going on inside my head, I think. India, I mean, just the fact that, I study something that many people would call Islamic India. I study Urdu and Persian, which are, traditionally associated with Islamic culture. What I quickly found was that in history, actually, these languages were the languages of many more people. In the same way that English came to India as a language that was spoken by Christians, it quickly became a language that spread beyond just that small community and is now an important language across India. And this is the sense that if you look through history, you constantly come back to this idea that that people come and go either through conquest or through trade or just settling here voluntarily. And throughout history, what's happened is that ideas and aspects of culture are sort of absorbed into a larger whole. So, for example, the sherwani that I'm wearing, is basically an early 19th century interpretation of Mughal court dress, which itself is a Central Asian style of clothing, combined with the British frock coat. And today it's an article of traditional Indian clothing, even though you can trace it to all of these different cultural influences. So in that way, it's a liberation for me, and also just the sheer ignorance of someone who comes from the West to India. It's glorious to constantly be learning new things.
I think that's very well put. But what interests me about Arthur's journey to India is that here is the outsider actually acting as a bridge among Indians. He's a scholar, a linguist of Urdu and Persian, a culture that is certainly very alive, but a language that is dormant. 100 years ago, Farsi and Urdu were the lingua franca of India. How many people actually read or write Farsi today? The number of Indian scholars in both languages is rapidly dwindling. Am I right?
That's absolutely right, yeah.
Right. So here is a scholar who is doing something that less and less Indians do, and I find that very, very fascinating. That we should now have to go to an American to decipher what is written on our great Islamic heritage and architecture. All those fantastic scripts that you read on gateways and tombs. Arthur Dudley can translate them, and very few Indians can. Big hand for him. Do you sometimes feel, as an American diplomat married to a Pakistani living in India, it's by nature such a contradictory situation? Do you feel conflicted? Or do you find also having to create bridges to survive? It's damn tough, your situation.
You said a mouthful. I find that it's more in the bridge building capacity. For instance, this was my husband's first trip to India. He was very excited to come to India. I have many friends in Pakistan that also are, have either come to India. Many who had already gone to Chennai, were giving me tips on things to do in Chennai, things to see. And the natural connections are already there. I don't have to work hard. I mean, that's the thing. It's hard to separate myself as an American diplomat from the fact that I am also married to a Pakistani, because everyone wants to talk about Pakistan. So when I meet with Indians, it's not, oh, well, U.S. is doing this, or what is it? It's always about my time in Pakistan, and what was that like, and how does it compare, and which do I like better, and what, all of these probing questions. Before coming to India, most people are getting nervous about political questions, or economic questions, or historical questions. For me, what am I going to say if they ask which cricket team I root for? There are photos of me wearing my Pakistani kit all over the internet. I can't really, defend that, right? There's no pictures of me in an Indian jersey.
So there is a sense of conflict.
There is. Oh, for sure. But as well, I think it's the opportunity, because, all those 500 kids who were shocked to hear that I was married to a Pakistani, that was all they wanted to talk about. Well, what is Pakistan like? And what, here's what I've heard. And is that true? And what is that? And so it's a natural bridge builder.
So you find that your Pakistani marriage, in fact, supersedes interest in America.
For me personally, I have found that. And maybe it's just the audiences that I've been talking with, but I have a very diverse, set of audiences. I've only been in Chennai 6 weeks. I've already traveled to Coimbatore, Avanashi, Madurai. I'm here in Bangalore. Next week I'm traveling as well. So I'm meeting with a diverse group of people, but the fascination with my connection to Pakistan really is very high on the list of what they're interested in and what they want to talk to me about.
Right. Dominique, let me bring you in here. You started out as a scholar of film in India. Then you went back and became deeply engrossed with Gandhian philosophy, politics, which brought you back. At what point did you really begin to feel immersed in India or at home here? I mean,
of
how
course I
did that,
can't-
can you pinpoint, can you roughly think when that turning point occurred in your life?
I can't give you a date, of course, but not so long after, I realized that somehow we were talking about that. Am I still a foreigner or not, etc. But we were talking with Andie about that. Maybe my foreigner status helped me go into places. I'm talking of certain pandits in some places where maybe, I must say, Indians, of course, would be allowed, but perhaps less easily, because I've seen surprise, people from India asking me, oh, you could go to this temple and talk to this pandit, but normally it's forbidden to foreigners. And I said, well, I just went there. I had the Chandogya Upanishad, and I said I wanted to ask some questions. And I was ready to have a refusal and say, okay, you're not there. And as I told Andie, I do think it's good sometimes to feel one can be discriminated against, because that's, the situation of many.
That's very interesting.
And I did feel it sometimes, but luckily, rarely. Maybe it was this audacity or the surprise, that the fact they were surprised. So maybe that's when I felt this may be an illusion that are there really national or nationalistic differences? Yes, of course, you may say, but I'm asking the question because, the interaction with a human being, especially if you talk on ideas, and if you genuinely ask questions, and sometimes very difficult questions, the most fantastic thing I've experienced is when you go and ask some of these pandits or scholars who, finally agree to receive you, and they say to a question, I'm not sure, I don't know. And this I felt extremely humbled to have this kind of answer. So that may be, I don't know if I've answered the question.
I think you have. You've touched upon a very interesting point. We are a very garrulous, we are a very talkative nation as compared to many other cultures, particularly in Europe. Indians are always chatting to one another. And I think one reason Indians never stop talking to one another is because many Indians are foreigners in their own country. So a train conversation, conversation at a bus stop, at an airport, is always different in India because Indians are dying to find out about one another, which is maybe one sense of comfort as you derived in your curiosity, in your quest, in your intellectual learning. Was that it?
I can't say, but I did experience the fact that it may have been easier for me to engage in philosophical discourse in India than in France.
Right.
So, because, in France is limited to official scholars. And in India, there are official scholars, but lots of unofficial scholars
of course,
who may
what we
be
call
more.
the great Vidwans. I mean, if you go to a sage or a seer in a temple, or a Sanskritist, for example, a philosopher, many of them can be very ordinary-seeming people who are out of the academic mainstream.
Yes.
But they're also great teachers.
Yes. So I know there is a lot of narrow-mindedness because even at some point when I was saying, what was my friends and Indian friends, I'm studying Sanskrit, there was this political connotation of, Sanskrit being ultra-right.
As in Arthur Dudley's case, who's a scholar of Persian and Urdu, there must be what? Persian, Urdu. What's the reaction when you tell people that you're a scholar of, when you tell Indians that you're a scholar of Persian, Farsi and Urdu? Puzzlement?
Not really, actually. As we were saying, people are happy to hear that someone is doing that sort of work. But I mean, one story I should tell that I think gets at this outsider-insider dynamic in terms of scholarship is that an Indian American anthropologist friend of mine and I were talking, and I was saying, you know, I really don't like being made to feel like an outsider here, and that happens whenever I go and I meet with someone, and you know, there's this whole preliminary stream of, you know, well, do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know that? To sort of establish my credentials. And his reaction surprised me. He said, well, at least those people will meet with you. You know, even if they're not telling you particularly helpful things, for some reason, they look down at us Indian American scholars because they can't quite work out, you know, should we be treated as Indians? Should we be treated as foreigners? And then one more story. I was in a train between Delhi and Rampur a few years ago, and I was just having a conversation, a very simple conversation with someone about, you know, we'd left the station like an hour late. So what time were we going to arrive in Rampur? We were talking in Hindi, and the conductor came in. He looked at me, and he produced a string of English words. He said, "Sir, tickets, please show." You know, so his English was not very good, and he was clearly tormented by the fact that he was going to have to communicate with me in English. And then the man that I'd been talking with, you know, suddenly jumps up and say, "Nahi sir, sabko achhi tarah Hindi aati hai." Okay, and then the conductor looked at me in amazement and said, "Kya aap Kashmiri hain?" No, not Kashmiri, definitely not Kashmiri. Pathan? No, I'm not a Pathan. Acha, Anglo-Indian. And then at that point, no, and he ran out of possibilities. And I will never forget, I can't describe the look he gave me, but then he bent down and he kissed my hand. And it was one of the most harrowing moments of my life. Because, you know, here I am, you know, what we would say in Persian or Urdu, nachis, you know, somebody unworthy. And here's some random man just deciding that I deserve this respect because I don't fit into any category. So anyway, strange things happen between Delhi and Rampur.
Well, I think it's not a harrowing story. I find that a very moving story, really, actually. What, after the stories he's told us, or the illustrations he's given us, I think tell us something very important about the role of the outsider in India. The outsider looking in, I often believe, can sometimes tell us more than the insider looking in. Because we are Indians inside in India, sometimes we view our lives and our worlds rather like frogs in a well. There are things, so much we take for granted about India as Indians that we never can achieve the perception sometimes of an outsider who sees things we don't see. Dominique, do you agree?
Well, it's difficult to agree because it's from your own point of view. And I don't think one could say that we can see more as an outsider inside. Maybe differently. Maybe
a different perspective.
Yeah. Maybe.
I for sure think it's given me much more access than I would have as, you know, an Indian, well, especially in Pakistan, I can say. I mean, the places I was allowed to go as a foreigner, as an American diplomat, as a woman in Pakistan, compared to what my, you know, friend or colleague or contact that I had in Karachi, I mean, it was a huge difference and a huge advantage. Actually, the British ambassador to Yemen, who is a woman, just wrote a piece about how being a woman diplomat actually has given her greater access. And I completely not only agreed with that, but I have seen it firsthand in my life, whether it's attending a Pashtun jirga in Quetta. I mean, what female would be allowed to go if she weren't a Western diplomat, American? So there were so many examples of times that I got to see and be a part of things as a Western American diplomat in Pakistan, all throughout the country of Pakistan, that I never would have seen. And that my friends would then, Pakistani writers that I'm friends with, tell me about that. You went to Pancha Sahib Sikh Shrine. What did you do? Were you able to go in the water? Did they let you go into the Gurdwara? What happened? And so here I am sharing my stories and my experiences, and simply because I was a Western diplomat, I was able to have all those experiences. And
Andie, if I may interrupt, another very important thing. Parts of the subcontinent are still a deeply conservative place. So in a way that can be viewed as being slightly threatening to the female outsider, but also it can be a huge advantage. You could go into a village home and talk to women in India or Pakistan, where Indian men couldn't penetrate the interior of a domestic or private environment. Is that true?
Very true, and that's what the ambassador to Yemen highlighted. We get to go to both things. So my male colleague, he's not going to be allowed to go in and talk with these acid victims or with women who have experienced gender-based violence or even a health clinic. They can't go into those places. I can. And at the same time, I'm able to go to the Pashtun jirga where I'm the only woman, and I'm only there because I'm a Western diplomat. I'm able to go to both places. And so in some cases, I feel that I actually have an advantage over my male counterparts, which is not often said as a woman, professional woman, working woman. And so I felt that has been a great advantage to me. And I've been surprised because many times I've thought, this group or organization is not going to want to meet with me. They're very conservative. And I found quite the opposite. They want to tell me why they believe what they believe. They want to know my perspective of their organization. We have a program right now in Tamil Nadu that's working with Jamaat leaders on formalizing nikah and the age of marriage. And here we are able to go into these, communities and talk in a way that I don't think many other, NGOs or other organizations would be able to do.
I'm absolutely sure that's true. That I think very often people, Indians or Pakistanis, will talk more easily to an outsider. It's like unburdening yourself, which you wouldn't do an insider. You may have restraints or codes, social codes that prevent you of being very frank in social hierarchies as in India or Pakistan. Whereas you can just unburden yourself to a foreigner. You can vent, you can dump, you can dish it out because the foreigner is going to go away.
Also, they always assume I don't speak the language. So many times in Pakistan, I had very senior journalists who didn't think I would know what they were saying in Urdu and speak very frankly in front of me in Urdu, not realizing I knew exactly what they were saying. So I think that has also, surprised people and been somewhat of an advantage. I mean, we speak Urdu with our children in the home, and, to have that kind of linguistic. This is actually the first time I'm coming to an assignment without having formal language training. So I don't speak Tamil, and I find it very frustrating. But I, knew Indonesian before going to Indonesia. I knew Spanish before going to Cuba, and learned Urdu in Pakistan as well as some Sindhi and Balochi. Here, my goal, I've shot a short, little video in Tamil that's on the web, but I'm trying to learn more.
Yes, it's like Arthur's story with the ticket collector to Rampur. Dominique.
May I add something on that, which is India is still one of the few countries where women and foreign women can travel more or less freely.
Safely or free, just freely? There's
a
great deal of controversy about the safety and position of women in India, so I don't know what foreign women feel like.
Yeah,
it would be interesting.
I mean, it's not safely, much more safely still than most countries in the world. I mean, I know there have been a lot of controversies and these rapes in Delhi. You know, even my daughter, who is of course half Indian, her friends in China were telling, oh, you are going to India, but you are not being afraid of being raped, etc. And that's what, because in other countries, rapes are not reported. The only positive things I see about the controversy is that, in fact, rapes, maybe the number of rapes, I don't know, and nobody knows if it has increased or decreased, but the reporting rapes and the shame attached to a rape for the person herself and the family, they have overcome the shame, and they have been able to report that. So, yeah, I know there are all these controversies, but as a fact, there are many, many countries where I used to travel before, and I can, but I feel uneasy to travel with. So.
Well, that's remarkable. You know, many of us believe that foreigners have a love-hate relationship with India, but these three foreigners have spouted nothing but poetry of love. So I think that's remarkable. And we have time for just a few questions. Anybody, hands up, please. Can you send a mic to the lady in the front row? Either.
Good morning. I'm Maya Chakravarti. My question is to Andie. I came in rather late, so I quite do not know if you had spoken about it. What made you take to mastering two rather difficult languages like Persian and Urdu? Because I find it very intriguing.
No, he's the scholar of Arthur. Arthur is the scholar of Persian and Urdu. Arthur.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh,
sorry. I came in late, I said. Sorry for the faux pas.
No. That's no problem. So after I came to India, essentially as a tourist, just staying with a family friend in Delhi, I realized that I was going to study Indian culture when I heard someone just on the street in a very ordinary conversation work some event from the Mahabharata into the point he was making. And as a scholar of Western literature up to that point, I was very interested in the way that very, very old stories, you know, the Odyssey, the Iliad, the way that these were taken up as cultural threads that keep being renewed with different generations. Because stories have a kind of power that requires that they speak to us at different times, and they have to be recreated, right? So I thought I was going to study Sanskrit and Hindi, and I thought I was going to look at essentially Tulsidas. But once in America, we learn Urdu and Hindi together to begin with. And I realized that I liked Urdu, the Urdu tradition more, personally it spoke to me more than the Hindi tradition. And I realized that it would be an Urdu and Persian project rather than a Hindi and a Sanskrit project. And that's essentially what I've been doing for the last 8 years. What's that?
Any other questions? Yes, a gentleman in the white jacket, please, in front.
Good morning. I'm Ambrish. I figured that out. Sunil said a couple of times, an American diplomat married to a Pakistani. So it kind of started inquiring me, saying that, does it over a period of time, does it act on your psyche that, did you do a correct decision in marrying a Pakistani? Or, the love transcends that amount of comment that you keep on getting saying that a foreign diplomat married to a Pakistani. Does it really bother your psyche?
It is a good question. No, in the sense that, it's a part of who I am. There are many parts of me. I'm a mother of two. I'm a wife. I am a diplomat. I am a shoe addict. I'm many things. And I can't deny it. And I feel like the more I try to, well, let me talk to you, an Indian audience, and I'm not going to disclose the fact that I'm married to a Pakistani, it feels disingenuous. It's a part of who I am. It has had an effect on me. At the same time that I say that, I wanted to come to India. This was number one on my list. We bid for our jobs. We're not assigned to a place. We have a choice. And I wanted to come to South India, especially. I was fascinated. I'd never been to South India. I'd only traveled in the north. I really wanted to come to Chennai. The consular district is amazing. It covers all of Tamil Nadu, all of Kerala, all of Karnataka. It would be the 5th largest country in the world. So to me, not only was that a big draw, the diversity of language and culture and everything in South India, but also it's really an exciting time. I mean, you're talking about sort of the dark period, but I think we're going into the light period of U.S.-India relations. I mean, like he said, this visit, it's not that I can't think of a visit by an Indian head of state that is this big. I can't think of any foreign head of state coming to the U.S. Maybe the Pope is the only other one I can think that has had this much of a rock star kind of acceptance, So this is an exciting time to be in India as an American diplomat. I am excited to be here. It's where I wanted to be. And my focus is on the exciting things we're doing. And we're doing a lot in South India. So yes, it's a part of me, but there's many other parts as well.
On that very buoyant high note, we'll end this discussion because we've completely run out of time. We've run over. But Andie and Dominique and Arthur are right here outside. You can continue your conversations with them. Thank you very much, and give them a hand, please. They've been a wonderful panel. I've learned so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sethi and the panel. I'd like to inform the audience that the authors will be outside in the book signing area, and anyone can get their book signed by the authors. Also, there is an event called Inquisition happening at the bookstore from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. It is the book quiz by Nexus Consulting. Also, since this edition is dedicated to the memory of late Dr. U.R. Ananthamurthy, do visit a photo exhibition on him in the cafeteria. Thank you very much. You've been a wonderful audience.